Hey, what's going on, everybody? We are here back again. It's Monday night, although, Monday night's still not that fun yet. We're still waiting for some football to kick off and all that fun stuff to get that going. But in the meantime, heck, I'll take it with these guys. I'll take it with my man on my left, Jeff. What's going on, Jeff? How we doing this evening?
I'm doing great, brother. Always tremendous to be speaking with you, gentlemen, on a Monday night. And I'll tell you, for those who don't understand the jersey I'm wearing, shame on you, and you should watch Varsity Blues. But anyways, good to be here with you, Mikey.
Rocking the tweeter jersey this evening. And down below me, I got my man, Joe. Joe, how we doing this evening, man? How's it going?
I like it. I feel like we're trucking along now here as we go through the AFC West. I think we took a little detour last week to talk about the Cardinals after the DeAndre Hopkins release, but I like that we're gaining some momentum. And I'll tell you what, too, it's June. I mean, 3 months, I think, from, about 3 months and a week away. I think they just said 100 days as of last week till NFL Week 1 kickoff. So we're getting there.
Heck yeah. What's weird is that DeAndre Hopkins hasn't been signed yet. Do you think he's sitting at home going, well, shit, shit, guys, we might be in big trouble right here.
Lots of rumors that first day, nothing since. I would imagine he's going to make his visit soon. But, I heard somebody say that he wants Beckham-like money, and the Bills didn't want to give him, or Baltimore didn't want to give him Beckham-like money. I would think he'd make more money than Odell Beckham, right?
I would think he would command a whole awful lot more. I mean, what is Odell Beckham? He gets paid per play, doesn't he? Like $50,000 per play, and they're counting on getting 6-7 plays out of the guy this year.
It's been a long time at this point, honestly, for him. Hopkins is just, you would think Hopkins is $20 million a year right off the bat, and nothing, But it'll be interesting to see what he commands market-wise.
Yeah, you'd think so. You'd think there'd be a team willing to pay that just to get just the seats that he can.
I wouldn't mind seeing Daniel Jones throw to him, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, he has been in the league 10 years, though, fellas. So, I mean.
But do you think he's on the decline?
No, I don't think he's on the steady incline, but certainly not on the decline. He's a steady guy at most, and has had his prime. So we'll see what happens, I guess.
Well, there you go. I mean, leave it to us to go sway away from the Raiders right away because it's such a wonderful fantasy team that we're getting ready to talk about this evening. That we're still talking about DeAndre Hopkins. You know who could use DeAndre Hopkins? The Raiders. They got. They did address some things in the draft, but most of it's in the laters. You got Michael Mayer, who is going to be backing up Austin Hooper, who got picked up this year. And then the other notable draft pick that they got, at least offensively, I mean, they picked up some solid studs on defense. But Aiden O'Connell, they drafted him at the quarterback position. Aiden O'Connell's actually not a bad guy to grab in your 5th round of your dynasty drafts. If you're drafted in dynasty rookie draft right now, came out of Purdue. The guy did pretty damn good. And when you look at the guys in front of him, and Brian Hoyer and Jimmy Garoppolo, this guy has a pretty clear window to maybe start this year. If because Jimmy Garoppolo is pretty injury prone, and Brian Hoyer, I believe, is like. I think he just turned 77 the other day or something like that. I mean, I know he was.
He just qualified for Medicare, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Josh McDaniels has kept him employed for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I like Brian Hoyer, but it just doesn't seem like that guy's going to be able to stay on the field very long either. So that's a guy I'm grabbing late in drafts, and that's about the only real notable things that I noticed off the draft. Joe, what did you think about their free agency? What did they do this year?
Yeah, it was a high volume free agent period for the Raiders, and it started right off the top really at quarterback. And you mentioned it, obviously bring in Brian Hoyer in, but they let Derek Carr go. They ate some money there. I don't understand. I will say, and I'm not a Carr lover. I don't hate him. I don't love him. I kind of feel the same way about Carr as I feel about Daniel Jones. He seems to be a decent quarterback. Absolutely no reason to think he can win you a Super Bowl at this point, but he can get you to the playoffs. They move on from him despite signing his best friend Devontae Adams, and they go to Jimmy G, 3 years, $67 million, $34 million guaranteed. Can Garoppolo stay healthy? They got Hoyer backing him up. The Raiders, it's so funny, man. everybody wants the Raiders to be good every year, right? Like they just like will them to have hype at this not spring training, but during training camp each season. I feel like it's the cool thing to think is that the Raiders are going to be good, but they're never actually that good. Now they're in a good decision, a pretty solid division, obviously between the Chiefs and up and coming Chargers, and we don't know really what you got with the Broncos, but Jimmy G at the helm there. I'd throw that to you guys. Do you feel like that's do you look at the Raiders and say they've upgraded their quarterback situation by making that move?
No, I'll just give you that, Joe. Let me tell you something. The most interesting thing about Jimmy G being at the Raiders is the fact that he got an offer from the Bunny Ranch for free sex for life. That's about the only thing better, and he's tremendous looking. Don't get me wrong, and I say this as a very heterosexual man. Jimmy G's a fantastic looking man. But is it me, or is that just a weird lateral move from Derek Carr to Jimmy G? I honestly don't get it. If they had some what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of. I'm forgetting the word, but like consistency with Davante Adams and Derek Carr. If you had that kind of going for 1 year, why kind of rock the boat with a guy who's no better than Carr? I don't know what you think, Mike. But
what do you think, Mikey?
Well, so I don't really think that. I think that it's actually, I'd call Jimmy G maybe at best mediocre Derek Carr. I mean, he doesn't. Right. I agree with the lateral move, except I would say that this is definitely a move that's going to cause some regression on the team, because I think while I like Jimmy Garoppolo, don't get me wrong, I think he's a pretty good quarterback. And if you look at his tutelage and lineage, the guy should be pretty damn amazing. But
he wins a lot of games. He's won a lot of games.
Well, I disagree. I think that defense has won a lot of games, and I think Jimmy G's done enough to keep him in that football game. But as far as offensive production and stuff like that, I don't really think that he's been able to bring it. And I don't think that that's something he's going to be able to offer the Raiders either. I think he was a dud. Who he reminds me of is Brock Osweiler. It's just that he's got a better opportunity to where he's able to look decent, but they win, but they win 6-3 because they were able to get down the field almost to the 40 and kick 2 field goals. Cause Robbie Gould is got a laser guided rocket foot, I mean,
Garoppolo played a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And he lost, right? Correct.
He lost.
Yeah.
And let's be clear, we're a fantasy show. So right off the bat, let's be real clear about something. You are not drafting Jimmy Garoppolo from a fantasy perspective as your number 1 QB in any situation whatsoever. There's no doubt about that. Now, his fantasy numbers probably will go up just from the fact that he's going to have 8 completions for 100 yards and a touchdown to Davante Adams pretty much every single week, but he's not a fantasy quarterback. I will say the Raiders have placed quite a few weapons around them. Obviously, first things first, they kept their running back Jacobs, which I mean, he really had a hell of a year last year, career year last year. So that I think was most important to them. They had a decent offensive line this last year, and they actually fortified that a little more. But really, if you're talking fantasy and targets and weapons, you mentioned it earlier, Mikey. Austin Hooper comes on to replace Darren Waller. They got a 3rd-round draft pick from the Giants for Darren Waller. What's his name? Morneau. He moved on to be a free agency. So Austin Hooper slated in to be the number 1 there. Proven production there. I mean, it's a downgrade versus a healthy Darren Waller, but they didn't get a healthy Darren Waller too much. The wide receiver situation is pretty interesting, though. You got to say, obviously, Davante Adams, top 5 wideout. He's their number 1. They signed Jacoby Myers from the Patriots, who was by far the Patriots' best receiver last year. 3 years, $33 million. Now, they don't need Myers to go. They don't need Myers to do a hell of a lot other than to just fucking make just consistent, easy, conservative plays and let Adams do his thing, really. So I like that. They still have Hunter Renfrow, I believe, and they signed DeAndre Carter from the Chargers. Their top 4 is pretty legit at wideout. You add Austin Hooper, you add Jacobs at running back. There's a lot of weapons on that offense and surrounding Jimmy G. It will be interesting to see what the production looks like.
Now, that's tremendous points, Joe. Now, just picture that with Derek Carr. Do you feel better about Derek Carr being there with all those guys than you do Jimmy Garoppolo?
I feel a little bit better about it. I do think that there's something to saying that Jimmy Garoppolo has made a Super Bowl and played in a Super Bowl. There's some experience that Carr does not have, and I don't think you can ignore that. Other than that, no, I would rather have Carr, and it would be better weapons than Carr had this year. That's a tough division. And the Raiders, their defense isn't up to snuff yet. And, the free agents wise, they fortified their run defense. They beefed up the defensive line a little bit. They signed a lot of cornerbacks. None of them are noteworthy, but a lot of number 2s, number 3s, Brandon Faison, Duke Shelley, David Long. They fortified the defensive tackle position with John Jenkins. He's a good run stuffer. I will say too, at tight end, OJ Howard came on too. So they got OJ Howard, who will push Austin Hooper, I guess, for some of the targets there at tight end. And two, I should also mention, we already mentioned 4 wideouts. They also signed Cam Sims, Keenan Cole, and Phil Dorsett. So the Raiders will have like 7 wideouts with, somewhat of, I don't want to say legit NFL production, but they'll go into camp with 7 wideouts with NFL production. It'll be interesting to see who gets the jobs there. They look at
a lot of nightmares coming out of Max Crosby and Chandler Jones.
Yes.
I think that's going to be a situation where you do see the Raiders improve drastically this year, as they're going to be able to get a lot of pressure on that quarterback this year.
I agree. And they also, they tried to get some depth and improve that linebacker position too, led by Robert Spillane, signing for 2 years, $9 million too. So, the defense looks like it's going to be a little bit better. We're talking about Garoppolo not being an upgraded quarterback, so that certainly isn't going to help their overall result next year. I see the Raiders being, like 9-8, somewhere between 9-8 and 6-11. Based on the schedule and how injuries shake out, but that probably doesn't even translate into a play. I don't think the Raiders are a playoff team yet.
Right, and their win-loss record aside, and I actually am glad you brought up all those guys, Joe. What that reminds me of is the New England Patriots from like 10 years ago, and of course this is a Josh McDaniels coach team, because from a fantasy standpoint, especially because you brought up all those guys, I didn't touch anybody on the New England Patriots, the Josh McDaniels offense from a fantasy standpoint, because he freaking spread it around so much. You could not count on any one person outside of Tom Brady. So this seems like it's kind of going that direction. Again, just from us on talking fantasy wise, even maybe Garoppolo you can trust, and Jacobs certainly, but from there,
wait a minute. What are you trusting Garoppolo for? A number as your starting fantasy quarterback?
No, certainly not. If it's a 2 quarterback league, then I say that he's probably a good pickup later on. But or maybe from a DFS standpoint, depending on his salary, it's probably a decent move. Obviously, that has to shake out there in a year, so there's something to take a look at, because he's going to get some yards thinking and dunking here and there, because you're not just going to rely on Jacobs. But it's a Josh McDaniels run offense. You're going to have those short passes all day long. You're going to have them get 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, and be fairly consistent, probably at a lower cost than a DFS standpoint.
It's fair. So let me throw this question to both of you. I'll start with you, Mikey, real quick. So Josh Jacobs has really played himself into probably a top 5 fantasy running back going into the season. Obviously, Devonta Adams is a top 5 wideout. Other than those 2 guys, is there anybody on this team you're excited for from a fantasy perspective, that whether you think it's a sleeper or it's something as straight as saying, I think Austin Hooper is going to turn into a number 1 fantasy tight end on this team? Where else is there anywhere else you would go fantasy wise on this team other than Jacobs and Adams?
There's a lot of question marks around the quarterback position, which makes me fade on most of the other positions, right? Like Austin Hooper's a good guy. I like him in DFS. If you can hit him on the 1 or 2 weeks that he's going to hit you that 10 plus points.
Right.
But I'm not a guy that I want. Not a guy I want on my roster. You know what I'm waiting for is, are we going to get our moment, you guys? Like the real life TV moment where Tom Brady's up there in the announcer's booth smoking a cigarette and he just has enough. and he goes down there on the field and doesn't even put on a pad or anything, just sitting there in a suit and starts throwing touchdowns.
Just wins the game. Wins the game immediately for him.
And wins the game, and furthermore wins the Super Bowl automatically because he did it while smoking in a suit.
Well, the day Tom Brady smokes a cigarette is the day he wins a Super Bowl wearing a suit. So
Yeah.
that would be something. But so let me throw something at you because Joe brought up Josh Jacobs. Obviously, the guy's a stud fantasy take, all day long. But I'll throw this at you, though. He had a lot of collective points last year. However, he had 3 games where he scored 32 plus points last year and 6 games where he was 10 and fewer in fantasy is concerned. He's a bit hot and cold. It seems like he got a little bit better towards the end of the season, but he's not that consistent guy each week. He's very much a home run or a strikeout kind of guy, it seems like to me.
No, it's a great stat, and I agree. I've never been a big Jacobs fan from a fantasy perspective. Now, I mean, last year, by the end of the year, he came on, and to your point, Maish, obviously it was with a few big games, but you're right. I've always kind of felt him to not be overly consistent. I will say the one thing that maybe makes me feel, and I don't love him because he's not a great PPR resource, or he hasn't been historically anyways. I think last year was the first year where the Raiders were really devoted and consistent in getting him high volume touches a lot of weeks. And they're going to need to do that going forward if Jimmy Garoppolo is their starting quarterback. But again, if you give me I'm just going to throw out only because it's same division, like Austin Eckler, I'd rather have Eckler from a PPR perspective. I'd rather have Saquon Barkley from a PPR perspective. Christian McCaffrey from a PPR perspective.
What about Javonte Williams?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
And we'll get into the Broncos on Wednesday. As boring as they are, that might be the only name we bring up. But well done, Mikey.
How do you feel?
My sad face,
Mike? Are you comfortable with a team with Jacobs as your number 1 running back?
This year, when I look at a running back that has that kind of volume coming off of last year, it's really hard to anticipate that they're going to be able to repeat that now.
Right.
Like Cooper Kupp got pretty damn close last year to his year before. And I think we'll probably see something like that again, because you do have these guys out there that can actually stand that test of time. But do I see Jacobs being big enough now? And if you look at what they did to that running back room, I mean, you got, what is it, Amir Abdullah? Who's the other guy? Let me look here.
Yep.
I'm looking now. Zamir White, Amir Abdullah, and Brandon Bolden. I mean, to be honest, that's not right. I mean, Jacobs has got he's 1A and 1B there. I feel like most teams probably have a better number 2 than Zamir.
Yeah, you're really not gonna lean on Amir Abdullah or Brandon Bolden. I mean, now Brandon Bolden in the passing game on a Josh McDaniels offense.
Right.
Well, Bolden's going to steal some touchdowns, some inexplicable touchdowns.
Yeah.
And that's my point. In Josh McDaniels' offense, you want nothing to do with them fantasy-wise. But anyways.
Yeah, no, it is. It's the same kind of Belichick style, man. I love McDaniels getting rid of what was it? Gosh dang it. Smoking Jay Cutler. That's who it was. Yeah. We got rid of Jay Cutler for the Broncos. Came there and just did all kinds of damage and then left.
Oh, Mikey, you're still bitter. I mean, what are we throwing back 15 years? You're still bitter, bro. Gee, look at you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
So let me throw out one more question for you guys, Raider-wise, not necessarily fantasy-wise, but where do you guys – I mean, I think I have them third in the division right now. I'm going to believe that the Broncos don't do much more than they did last year, and Garoppolo wins regular season games. That's something he has figured out throughout his career. So I'm going to put the Raiders third behind the Chiefs and the Chargers, and above Denver going into the season in that division. What about you guys?
So I'll kind of agree with that, but I don't like the chart. I think it seems like the Chargers are regressing a little bit.
Yeah, I don't love them either.
I can see now the Broncos have all the potential in the world, and I thought they'd do a hell of a lot better last year than they did. So, you could sell me on the Broncos being last in the division or second. I think we're all going to put Kansas City at number 1, but I can see the Raiders getting second and having the Broncos and the Chargers being a close third and fourth. It's really a crapshoot after Kansas City, though. What do you think, Mike?
I actually think we'll see I think it'll be the Chiefs, then I think we'll see the Chargers second. But I think the Broncos will be a close third on that, and I think we see Raiders in fourth in division. But I'm 100% with you, Jeff, because I feel the same way. I think that this, outside of the Chiefs, this division could really go. All these teams actually have potential to go bananas and be fantastic at football if they can somehow put it together. If Garoppolo can figure out a mix to get that offense clicking and running and everything like that, they've got a pretty decent defense. They'll be able to keep in game. Same with Denver.
And you know what's funny? I'm glad you said that, because going into last season, I would have said that division might have been the toughest division in football. Just looking at it on paper going into last season, but seeing what played out, it just was underwhelming. But they have the potential is there. We all know that.
That was going to be my final point, Jeff. I remember a year ago, there was so much hype with that AFC West from a fantasy perspective, offensively with all those teams, and just in general. Obviously, the Chiefs, Chargers considered up and coming, Russ Wilson in Denver now, Raiders trade for Devonta Adams, and it kind of like that's the AFC East, tenfold now. In the West, I feel like people this year are kind of like, no, now I just feel like it's the Chiefs and a big bag of shit. So it's gonna be interesting to see. And the Chiefs, other than the fact that the Chiefs don't have a lot of wideouts for Mahomes this year, it's gonna be interesting.
Doesn't matter
if anybody can touch them. It's feeling hopeless.
Yeah. Should be interesting, but I'd like to see what you just said and have a free for all, and I'd love to see that division be good again. We'll see what happens.
That is funny how much a difference 1 year changes, because everybody was super hyped on that whole division last year, myself included. And yeah, this year it's the complete opposite. I'm like, I don't even know if there's like 5 players out of the whole entire division that I want on my fantasy lineup. That
Mahomes,
especially
Kelsey,
well, once you start considering ADP and stuff like that in there too, I'll be lucky to get 2 or 3 guys out of there at the end of the draft. Because I'm not going to reach for Kelsey. I'm probably likely not going to reach for Mahomes either. So
I never have Kelsey
like that. I'm like, this will be that really starts thinning guys out once you lose those 2 teams. But
that's a great point, real quick, Mikey. Fantasy wise, just to keep this, sometimes I go off the fantasy. It's a really good point. Like a guy like Kelsey, and it reminds me of Gronkowski back in the day. You can take it at tight end, but there was even like some running backs here too, like that were in this category. Like I never drafted Kelsey in a league. I've never had Travis Kelsey. I don't think one time in any league, 5, 6, 7 leagues a year, I never draft Kelsey because I will never pay that price for a tight end. But then from a DFS perspective, I'll freaking cling to Kelsey, all year long as it makes sense. It's funny how you have guys like that.
Well, yes, Joe, and sorry to make this go long, but because what you see with tight ends, Kelsey is a number 1 wide receiver at not number 1 wide receiver money from a DFS standpoint. So why wouldn't you put him in as a flex anyways?
Yeah, no doubt about it. No, I love Travis Kelsey. He's a GOAT, and he's going to continue to probably just pummel numbers, man, because he's got the recipe for it. But we're not here to talk about the Chiefs. We're here to finish off about the Raiders. That's twice now we've had to veer off the subject because poor Raiders. It's going to be a mess, I think, but it'd be cool to see that team actually be able to turn it around, see Jimmy Garoppolo actually get some vindication, and he could actually do great in shutting me up when I keep saying that I don't really think it was him winning football games. I think it was actually the team around him, because he had Kittle and he had Deebo Samuel, and those guys are next level talent. So
and a great running game. No matter who it was.
Coach. Shanahan's an amazing coach. So I think he definitely had a downgrade too going into this Raiders organization, but we'll see, man. That team surprised me many times in my history, in my life. And like I said, hopefully we see that division kind of turn it around a little bit more. Guys, do we have anything else to add to that this evening?
Well, I think that's it, because the Broncos discussion will be about 7 minutes on Wednesday, because that's how boring they are. But I digress, Mikey.
Yeah, I'll be able to throw some love at him because I am, at the end of the day, I'm a diehard Broncos fan. But at the end of that day, I'm also a reality analyst, and I see with the writing on the walls. I'm like, man, I just can't admit that they did what they did until I see it this year. I hope Russell Wilson doesn't suck this year, because if he sucks this year, that's going to be 3 bad years for the Broncos after that. I mean, there's almost no way around that. And that's just what hit us on the initial draft picks and the draft capital that he costed. Oh my God, we could just go on for days about that. But
real quick too, it's funny, man, because I'm looking, they got 3 legit wideouts for the guy, and they got a good running game. There's no excuse. And a decent defense.
Which we can get into on Wednesday, Joseph. Let's tease a little bit to Wednesday, baby.
All right, guys. With that, we're going to go ahead and call it an evening. We'll hopefully a little bit better closeout than last week. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties, and I hung my 2 boys out here to dry, and they have they couldn't do anything about it. So kudos to them for closing it out the way they did. They still did it very professionally. I love these 2 gentlemen. And we will see you guys Wednesday, 9 p.m., same bat time, same bat channel, guys. And we will see you then. Thank you so much.